Also back from vacation and back on the trail, President Biden's heading out west today, but the scandal over his son's consulting work creeping closer to the Oval Office by a number of times. Good morning, everybody. It's a Tuesday. I'm Bill Hemmer, morning at home, morning partner.
Good morning. Great to see you, too. I'm Dana Perino, and this is America's Newsroom. So, yep, that's happening. Yes. And President Biden is going to head to Arizona today. He will tout his record on climate and the economy. Notably, he is not going to do anything on the border. But what is overshadowing his trip are these new details on his son's overseas consultings and how it really blurred the line between politics and profit.
So we are now learning one of Hunter's former business partners visited the White House at least 36 times during the Obama years, which is more than previously thought. Meanwhile, Fox has obtained this letter from then Vice President Biden to another of Hunter's colleagues. It further contradicts the argument that Biden was completely removed from his son's work.
All this fueling calls for an impeachment inquiry. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says the country needs answers.
I think there's enough proof out there that this Biden family needs to come forward and show there wasn't a pay-to-play. America deserves more, and Americans want to know. And the one thing I will tell you is, as this Congress, the People's Congress, we will follow the facts and provide it to the American public, just like the Constitution tells us to do.
Kicking us off today, Team Fox coverage, Andy McCarthy here with analysis. But let's begin with Jillian Turner at the White House on a beautiful day down there. Hi, Jillian.
Hi, Dana and Bill. The president's out west now. He's going to spend the next 3 days touting the climate crisis and his green energy agenda. He has left behind a White House staff, though, that is facing increasing scrutiny over his alleged role in his son's foreign business deals. Take a look at this. The president was here briefly at the White House yesterday. He welcomed the Houston Astros. He didn't take any questions from the press, but he did crack a couple jokes.
Rusty, it wasn't easy. People counted you out saying you're past your prime. Hell, I know something about that.
A Fox Digital investigation now finds Hunter Biden's former business associate Eric Schwerin visited the White House and Vice President's residence during the Obama years 36 times. The president has all along insisted he never spoke to his son about his foreign business, indicating as recently as 2020 he'd never even really heard of Burisma.
Nothing was unethical. Here's what the deal. With regard to Ukraine, we had this whole question about whether or not, because he was on the board, I later learned of a Burisma.
Devin Archer, another of Hunter's former business associates, claimed in a deposition that President Biden actually attended a Burisma dinner back in 2015. Biden also penned a letter to Archer in 2011 after they attended the same lunch. He writes, quote, "I apologize for not getting a chance to talk to you at the luncheon yesterday. I was having trouble getting away from hosting President Hu. I hope to get a chance to see you again soon. With Hunter." So today the president's in Arizona at the Grand Canyon. He is focused elsewhere. He is touting Native American heritage issues today, hoping maybe in the next couple of days we can get in a question with him. Peter Ducey is traveling on the road. Obviously, we'll bring that to you if we get it, as soon as we do.
Shout it if you can, Peter. We'll be watching. Jillian, thank you.
Listening. Andy McCarthy joins us. Andy, welcome to the program. Good morning to you.
Hi.
Byron Donalds, Republican from Florida, said this to Laura last night.
There was Devin Archer, Mr. Schwerin, or even, let's go back in the past, Tony Bobolinsky. All this is doing is filling in the narrative of the corruption that has surrounded Joe Biden for what appears to be now at least a decade.
More and more names, Andy, more and more visits. You say we are making a mistake by misdescribing the scheme. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, the business bill is Joe Biden. You know, there's a lot of questions about how often did Joe talk about the business with Hunter? Was he involved in the business with Hunter? That gets the cart before the horse. The business was Joe Biden. Access to Joe Biden. If there's no Joe Biden, there's no business. So, to talk about, like, did Hunter or did Joe talk to Hunter about the business, which was actually selling to buyers the air of association and connection to Joe Biden, it's just ridiculous. He is the business. This goes to, a point that Dana made when we were talking about this last week. There are all these government ethics rules that prevent exactly the sort of thing that went on here. And there's no way that this business could have gone on for 5 minutes under those circumstances unless Biden approved of it. So he's the business.
You write about political power as a commodity and the impact on the public's trust. Would you expand on that?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of talk, Dana, about, like, did Joe Biden do something affirmative for, say Burisma? Like, was his using of his influence to get the prosecutor who was looking into Burisma fired, was that as a result of the payments that the Burisma people were making into the Bidens? That's all very interesting, and it ought to be investigated to the ground. But the nature of the business here was Biden's political influence and the idea that it was a commodity that you could have access to, not that he necessarily had to do anything affirmative, but merely by having access to and connection to the very powerful guy, that would discourage things like the Ukrainian government or the British government taking additional steps to investigate the Burisma people who were brandishing the fact that they had the vice president's son on their board. The whole idea is to be close to and connected to the power center to discourage people who might otherwise give you a hard time. They have a euphemism for it. They call it understanding or navigating the regulatory environment. But what it is you know, the powerful guy in government, that will encourage or discourage the other smaller people in government from coming after you.
Remember, this is the vice president years, all right? White House 36 times, residence 27 times, which is up the street. All right, that's a lot, and that's just what we know of right now. On the Trump matter, it appears that his attorneys are arguing this is a First Amendment case. You tell us what you think should be off limits, and then we'll debate as to whether or not we agree with that, and the judge has scheduled a hearing on that matter. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, Bill. But, you know, the context here is important. The Justice Department here worked with the January 6th committee, and they put out a very hyper-partisan, one-sided view to the whole country of what this investigation was about. Then, right after they returned the indictment, Smith, the prosecutor, speaks for 3 minutes. 2.5 of it is about the Capitol riot, which he didn't even charge in the case. And now the government is coming into the court saying they're afraid of what Trump is going to say about what this is all about. I mean, you can't play the kind of games that they're playing and then not let the other guy respond. It's just, it's basically unfair.
The other thing is that the Justice Department had better be on watch for everybody not to leak anything about this, because that's what we saw in the documents case, right? So they indicted, and then all this other evidence started dribbling out, and it could only have come from the Justice Department. So I think that the Trump team might be able to push back on that as well. Andy McCarthy.
I see you, Andy.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Sir.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.